I believe I already mentioned, but if not, I will mention it again, that the Greeks never figured out how to build a self-supporting theater. All of their theaters needed to be built into a hillside. They did backfill some areas, but they couldn't create areas that had a Colosseum type of effect to it. When the Romans then got involved in building theaters, sometimes they just converted existing Greek theaters, but many times they would build a theater. And the Romans were very good about building things. The Romans didn't like to let nature get in the way of what they wanted. In many areas, if they wanted a theater, they would build it. It's the same way in much of Europe. You can tell a road is built on top of what used to be a Roman road, because the Romans built roads in the straightest lines they could possibly build them in. They learned how to build bridges and embankments and viaducts that would allow them to get around nature. And while with the Greeks, if they wanted a theater, had to search for the perfect hillside, the Romans said, we want a theater here, we're going to build it. When the Romans adapted a Greek theater, one of the things they did is they cut the orchestra in half and moved the scene house, the structure behind the orchestra, closer to the audience. It also then, it was during the Roman time that the scene house got to be more of a stage. The top of it, the roof in that area, got to be more of a stage, and the area that used to be for the chorus was actually eventually used for audience purposes, or for more brutal types of acts that we might discuss a little later on. In keeping with the idea that the Romans didn't really like theater that much, at least the Roman government didn't, there wasn't a theater built on what we think of as Italy now, so anywhere within the actual homeland of the Roman world, until 75 BC. That is in the city of Pompeii, which is a city that was covered when Mount Vesuvius blew its top. They actually built a permanent permanent theater. Up to this point, any theaters used on the Italian peninsula were temporary structures. It took another 20 years before a permanent theater was actually built in the city of Rome itself, and this was only because one of the most powerful generals before the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, for a while was ruled by a group of 3 men, and one of the original 3 men was the General Pompey. And Pompey managed to build a theater in the city of Rome. He was powerful enough to do that. Shortly after Pompey built his theater, then another important general builds a theater in the city of Rome, and then shortly after that, a third important general builds a permanent theater in the city of Rome. Again, this is getting close to the end of the time when drama was gone, and so these theaters were used more for spectacle and bloody types of violent types of drama, as opposed to something that we would think of as drama. By the time the empire gets underway, the theaters have been co-opted in many ways to be propaganda vehicles for the government. And for instance, by 80 AD, the Colosseum in Rome has been completed, which really is a theater. It's an amphitheater. And generally speaking, it is, if you took 2 Roman theaters and built them back to back and maybe extended a little, that is what a Colosseum is. So you don't really have a stage house in the middle, you just have a big orchestra. Places like the Colosseum were used for military celebrations, for victory parades, and for showing how wonderful the Romans were. We have in existence only examples of comedies from this period of time that we like to think drama flourished, from the Republic. We only have tragedies in existence from the time that is the Roman Empire. And these tragedies are what we tend to call closet dramas. In other words, they were written as intellectual exercises, never intending to be performed. The reason there are no plays that were intended to be performed still in existence is if you're basically doing skits and variety acts, there isn't a script worth preserving. And the only things that we have from these early ancient time periods are things that someone felt was worth preserving. One of the reasons that we know what we know about the Greek playwrights is because the Roman playwrights believed that these Greek plays were of value, and so they preserved them. And most of the Roman tragedies really are directly stolen from the Greek tragedies. And on the bottom of page 73, there's a list of contributions that Roman theater made to world drama. And while I have stated it wasn't nearly as great as what the Greeks did, there are some notable contributions. One, the chorus was eliminated. Plays were separated into acts, which continues to today. Often musical accompaniment was added to the dialogue, and oddly, all the action of a Roman play took place in the streets, even if it should logically have taken place indoors. Another major contribution that Roman theater made was eavesdropping, that is, overhearing a conversation that isn't supposed to be something you can hear. This ability adds to all kinds of plot complications and is used in both comedy and in drama. What happened in Zero, the year 0, so right there where BC turns into AD, is this guy named Christ, and he's important to Roman theater because slowly, as is common, as I said before, when the Romans would conquer an area, they would co-opt their gods. So when they conquered an area where there were these newfound Christians, the Christian god was taken into the pantheon in Rome. At first, particularly in the seats of power within the Roman Empire, Christians were very much made fun of because it was inconceivable to a Roman that there would be just a single god, and the fact that these Christians claimed not only that there was only one god, that every other god was fake, really angered a lot of people, and so they were persecuted. This persecution lasted for several hundred years. Slowly, though, Christianity started to gain more and more support and became more and more powerful. It took about 300 years for this to happen, though, and there are two emperors that really are monumental in this transition. One is Constantine, and he usually gets all the credit. Constantine declared Christianity to be a legal religion. Up to that point, it was illegal to be a Christian. He also outlawed the persecution of Christians. Shortly after him was Emperor Theodosius. Theodosius made Christianity the only state religion, so elevated Christianity to the number one place in the Roman world as far as religion goes. This, again, all becomes important, and I mentioned that the history of theater and the history of religion are intertwined, that some of the people who made the most amount of fun of the Christians early on and poked the most amount of fun at them were actors or in the theater world. And